On my 30th birthday, my parents handed me a suitcase and told me to leave. No cake, no smile, no goodbye. Just a cold sentence from my father: "You're too old to freeload." What they didn't say, but I couldn't forget, was this: for the past 8 years, I'd paid the electric bill, covered the internet, the gas, the water. I paid for their car insurance. I even covered half the mortgage, while they called me a burden. The worst part wasn't being kicked out. It was realizing they'd planned it. Down to the date. Down to the silence. I was never a daughter to them. I was a backup wallet. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I packed my bags. And that night I logged into every account they'd ever relied on. And one by one I started turning things off. They wanted me gone, so I made sure they felt it. Have you ever reached a breaking point like that, where love turns to survival because they left you no other choice? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you've ever been called a burden just for giving too much, you're not alone, because this is how I finally chose myself. My name is Ava Marin. I'm 30 years old, a full-time accountant, and until recently, I lived in my childhood home in Ridgeway, Ohio. Not because I couldn't afford to leave, but because every time I tried, my parents found a new reason I couldn't. Your dad's back is acting up again. Your mom's having those dizzy spells. The roof is leaking. The bank's calling about the mortgage. Always another excuse, and I believed them because I wanted to. Growing up, I wasn't the kind of kid who gave them problems. I kept my grades up, did the chores without being asked, tried to be invisible when they fought, which was often. Cullen, my father, was a proud man with nothing to show for it. He lost job after job but blamed the world for each one. Vera, my mother, was softer on the surface, but her silence always sided with him. They weren't affectionate people. Hugs were rare. I love you even rarer. But I clung to the idea that if I just helped enough, worked enough, gave enough, one day I'd be enough. I got my first job at 16, part-time cashier at a grocery store. Used my paycheck to buy my own clothes so they didn't have to. At 18, I started college while working full-time. At 22, I got the accounting job I still hold today. From there, the pattern began. Ava, can you cover the electricity? Ava, we're behind on water again. Ava, the internet's about to get shut off. Can you just pay it and we'll pay you back? They never did, but I never pressed. Every time I tried to draw a line, I heard the same line. We gave you life. You owe us. And I believed that too for far too long. The turning point came slowly. It wasn't one big betrayal. It was 1,000 tiny ones. Like the time I skipped a weekend trip with friends because mom needed new tires, or the winter I worked overtime every weekend to pay for the new furnace, only for dad to tell the neighbors he had handled it, or the holidays when I'd buy the groceries, do the cooking, clean the mess, and still be the one they mocked for never doing enough. But I told myself it was family, and family meant sacrifice. Even when birthdays went unnoticed, even when I was sick and no one offered soup or silence, even when I once cried alone in my room. Because the paycheck was short and I didn't know how I'd cover it all, I still showed up for them. And maybe that's the saddest part, that I kept showing up. Until the day they decided I wasn't worth keeping. The day I came home carrying a cake I'd bought for myself. The icing was crooked. The candle was bent. But it was still something. I didn't expect a party, but I didn't expect to be evicted either. Not after everything I'd done that night. I realized something I'd been too afraid to face. I was never part of a family. I was part of a system. And that system was built to break me, so I did what they never saw coming. I stepped out of it and I started planning something. That would change everything. It didn't hit me until I was halfway up the stairs, cake box in one hand, coat still on. This wasn't a drunken outburst. This was deliberate, calculated. They'd waited until the one day I might have expected even a flicker of kindness. To toss me out like a bag of trash. The suitcase had been packed for days. I'd started it quietly, one folded shirt at a time, always hiding it under my bed. Not because I was planning to leave, but because something deep inside me knew the door would eventually close, and I'd need to be ready. Still standing in my bedroom that night, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of what just happened. It settled in my chest like concrete. I set the cake down on the nightstand. Its bright red frosting looked ridiculous now, a mockery of a celebration that never came. I didn't cry. Not yet. There was no time for that. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. And the voice in my head, the one I'd silenced for years, finally said it aloud. They used you. Not loved, not supported, not protected. Used. It started with the money. Always the money. Electric, gas, groceries, insurance premiums, car repairs, streaming subscriptions. At some point, I'd become the household infrastructure, but no one saw it. No one wanted to see it, because that would mean acknowledging what they were taking. And then came the guilt. The manipulations dressed up as duty. Your father's health isn't great, you know. Your mom's already stressed enough. Don't make her worry, just help this once more. Ava, you're good with numbers. You'll figure it out. Every time I tried to set a boundary, it was met with guilt or punishment, silent treatment, snide comments. The occasional sarcastic, must be nice to have money from the same people who drained every cent I saved. I thought back to last winter. The roof had started leaking during a storm. Dad sat on the couch, beer in hand. Yelling at the Weather Channel, I was the one up on a ladder in the cold rain hammering down shingles I bought with my bonus. The next day, he told the neighbor it was just a minor patch job. Never mentioned me, never even said thank you. I remembered Vera's soft voice, always gentle but lined with razor edges. Don't bring up what you've done, sweetheart. That's not what family does, but wasn't it? Wasn't family supposed to support each other, lift each other up, protect, not extract? Because mine just took. And then on the one day that should have been about me, they decided they were done. No explanation, no gratitude. Just a final verdict. You're too old to freeload. It was as if the past decade didn't exist. As if I hadn't been the one keeping their world spinning. But something inside me shifted that night. The sadness, it started to calcify into something else. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. I saw them for who they truly were. Not parents who made a mistake, but people who never saw me as their equal. And suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of leaving, not of being alone, not of what they might say to the neighbors or post on Facebook. Because I knew something they didn't. They might have kicked me out of that house, but I was about to show them what it really meant. To lose me. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there on a bed I was about to leave behind, listening to the old house creak like it always had. Except now the sound wasn't comforting. It was accusing. It was tired. It was hollow. At 2:17 a.m., I sat up. My laptop blinked quietly from the nightstand waiting. And without hesitation, I opened it. One by one, I logged into every account tied to this house. Every single utility was in my name. It had started small: electricity after Dad forgot to pay, and we lost heat for 2 days, then water, then gas, then internet, because Vera couldn't miss her dramas. My salary had become the backbone of their comfort. And now that they had discarded me, they'd soon learn what comfort really cost. Click cancel, electric auto pay. Click remove, debit card from water bill portal. Click terminate gas account. Each confirmation ping felt like breathing deeper for the first time in years. Next came the cable, then their Amazon account, their Netflix. The family phone plan gone. It wasn't out of spite. It was arithmetic. They had removed me, so I was removing myself. Then came the emergency savings account. The one I'd built with good intentions, the one Vera had begged me to share access to. For emergencies, she said. Funny how the emergencies always aligned with their poor planning. I froze the account, locked it with a password and a call to the bank. It would take weeks of paperwork for them to unlock it. And by then, I'd be long gone. A part of me trembled, not with guilt, but with finality, because this was the moment. The line in the sand. No more second chances. No more explanations. Downstairs, I could still hear the television buzzing faintly. Some old sitcom laugh track echoed up the stairs, haunting. They were still watching, still living. Still pretending like tonight was just another night. They didn't even realize what they'd lost. I walked quietly to the top of the stairs and stood there in the dark, looking down at them through the banister. Cullen was passed out in his recliner. Vera was scrolling her phone, glass of wine balanced on her knee. Neither of them noticed me. I could have said something, could have made a scene, demanded an apology, begged for closure. But no. That would have given them too much power. Instead, I turned back toward my room. Each step slower than the last, dragging like a final heartbeat. Inside, I closed the door softly. No slamming, no theatrics, just silence. And then, I started to pack. Not the panic packing of someone running away, but the deliberate, careful movements of someone walking towards something else, something better. I folded each piece of clothing neatly, rolled my socks with care, zipped the suitcase with hands steadier than they had any right to be. Then I opened my drawer and pulled out a yellow notepad, wrote down every account I had just disconnected, item by item, line by line. It wasn't revenge, it was an audit, a record, a reckoning. By the time the first glow of morning cracked through the blinds, the list was done. The suitcase was ready, and so was I. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the smashed cake on the floor. The red frosting smeared like a wound, a symbol of how much I'd tried, and how little it had mattered I wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had drained out of me, replaced by a stillness I didn't recognize, but welcomed. That morning I walked out the front door without a word, without a note, without a single backward glance, because what they didn't know was this: you can't evict someone who already left you long ago. I didn't go far. Just a few blocks down to Nora's apartment. Nora had been my closest friend since high school. She was the only one who ever saw through the cracks in my smile. When I knocked on her door, dragging my suitcase behind me, she didn't ask questions. She just opened the door, hugged me once, and said, "Took you long enough, we made coffee," sat in silence. She didn't rush me to speak. She knew better. And when I finally told her what happened from the birthday eviction to the final click of cancellation, she didn't gasp. She didn't say, "But they're your parents," she said. "Good. They don't get to use you anymore." The next morning, the messages started. Voicemails, missed calls, texts piling in like floodwater. First from Vera soft, shaky Ava. "There's been a misunderstanding. You wouldn't just leave us like this, right? Call me, please. We're family." Then came Cullen. "You think this is funny. You'll regret turning your back on us. You're nothing without us." I stared at the screen. The contrast between those voices, almost laughable, guilt and rage, dancing like old partners. But I didn't answer. Instead, I did what they never expected. I built a case. I pulled out my receipts. Literally years of bank transfers, utilities in my name, insurance plans covering their cars, screenshots of auto-pay accounts, email chains with the landlord about roof repairs and plumbing fixes. I made a digital folder, backed it up 3 times. Then I printed everything, labeled it, color-coded it. This wasn't just evidence, it was liberation. Meanwhile in Ridgeway, Cullen took the next step. He went public, posted on the town's Facebook group. "My daughter abandoned us. After everything we sacrificed, she left us sick and starving." No warning, no goodbye. Within hours, comments poured in. Some sympathetic, some vicious, ungrateful brat. "Parents give you life, how dare you treat them this way?" "Rotten generation, no loyalty." I stared at the screen, felt the familiar sting behind my eyes, but this time I didn't cry. Nora saw the post before I did. She glanced at me, her voice calm but firm. "They're writing your story. Are you going to let them know?" Not this time. I opened my laptop, opened the folder labeled Truth, and I began to build a thread. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't angry, it was clinical, precise exhibit. Screenshots of every utility bill, electric, gas, water, all in my name. Exhibit B, mortgage transfers from my account. Exhibit C, the email where I begged Cullen to help with repairs, his only reply. Handle it. Exhibit D, photos of me on the roof, mid-storm, hammer in hand. And finally, a short statement. "They called me a freeloader on my 30th birthday, but I've been paying their bills since I was 22. I didn't abandon them. I stopped being their ATM. I hit post. Then I closed the laptop. No fanfare, just the low hum of the fridge and the quiet heartbeat in my ears." What happened next was faster than I imagined. Friends shared it, old classmates, even my former boss. One neighbor commented, "I remember seeing Ava shovel their driveway alone when she was a teenager, while her parents yelled from the porch." Another, Cullen always bragged he hadn't paid a cent since Ava got her job. People remembered more than I thought. They'd just been silent until I wasn't back at their house. Panic set in. Cullen tried to save face with another angry post. "She's exaggerating. Families fight." but the comments turned. Someone wrote, "Funny how your version of sacrifice looks a lot like exploitation." Vera left a voicemail that night, pleading Ava. "I didn't know he was going to post that. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Please take the post down. People are judging us. Not, we're sorry, not. You didn't deserve that, just concern about how it looked." And that's when it hit me. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. The stability, the convenience, the unpaid labor. But love? No, they'd never chosen that. So I chose something else. I chose peace. I chose boundaries. I chose myself. I thought the story might quiet down after that. But Ridgeway was a small town, and small towns don't let things go easily. 2 days after I posted the thread, I was drinking coffee on Nora's balcony when I heard her say quietly, "Don't move, but your dad just walked into the fall festival." My stomach twisted. The same festival I used to volunteer at, running the pie booth, handing out cider. But this year, I stayed hidden at the edge of the crowd, watching Cullen pace in front of the apple bobbing stand like a preacher looking for a pulpit. Then he started shouting. "She turned her back on her own blood. She left us with nothing. She wants people to feel sorry for her, but she's a liar." The crowd shifted. Some nodded in confusion. Others looked uncomfortable. One woman whispered, "Isn't that the girl who paid for their house repairs?" Another muttered, "I heard she paid their bills since college." I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. The cracks were showing. The mask was slipping. Back at Nora's place, I got a message from someone unexpected, Mrs. Langford, my elementary school teacher. It said, "I'm proud of you, Ava. You always carried more than a child should. We all saw it. We just didn't know how to help." Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I sat on the couch quiet, watching the sunlight through the blinds dance across the floor. I wasn't invisible anymore, but Cullen and Vera weren't done. 3 days later, I got a knock at the door. A uniformed officer, polite, calm, "Miss Ava Marin." I nodded. He handed me a large envelope. "You've been served inside a civil suit, filed by Cullen, allegations. Theft, elder neglect, emotional cruelty." I laughed, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. They were suing me for walking away, for not being their provider anymore. Nora sat beside me reading the document. "This is garbage," she said, "but you'll need to fight it," so I did. That afternoon, I contacted a legal aid office in Columbus, explained everything, sent them the documents I'd already collected. Their response was swift. "You have a solid case, Ava. In fact, you could countersue for financial exploitation and coercion. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth to matter. So I filed a formal complaint outlining 8 years of forced financial dependence, under manipulation, under guilt, under silence." The lawsuit turned public quickly, and just like that, Cullen and Vera's narrative unraveled. I heard Vera had a breakdown at the grocery store, that Cullen yelled at a neighbor who mentioned the Facebook post, that the town council asked him to step back from organizing community events. Their voices grew quiet. Their shame grew loud. One day, while standing in line at the post office, a woman touched my arm. I didn't know her, but she said, "I used to feel sorry for them. Now I feel sorry for you. And proud." That word wrapped itself around my heart like a blanket, because for the first time I felt it too. When we finally met at the mediation hearing, Cullen looked smaller, his voice quieter. The officer explained that their claims could lead to defamation charges, that the proof I'd submitted was more than enough to dismiss their case. Vera cried. Loudly, Cullen stood up, chair scraping. "This is a witch hunt," he barked. "She's twisting everything. I didn't speak. I didn't need to." The documents spoke for me. The years I'd been silent now screamed from every page. The officer looked at me as they left and said, "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." As I walked out of that courthouse, the wind picked up, leaves swirling across the pavement, the sun warm on my face. And in that moment, I knew something for certain. I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a trap. A month later, I moved into a small apartment above a bookstore downtown. It smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. The windows were drafty, the floor creaked, and I'd never felt safer in my life. I bought secondhand furniture one piece at a time, a wobbly table, a chipped mug, and a pale blue armchair that hugged me like I mattered. No one shouted from the other room. No one handed me overdue bills. No one questioned my value. For the first time in years, I got to live as a person, not as a provider, not as a punchline, not as a pawn. One afternoon while unpacking the last box, I found it. That plastic cake topper from my birthday, bent, scratched, forgotten. I held it in my hand and waited for the ache, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt pride. It was proof. Not of what they'd ruined, but of what I'd survived. I placed it gently on the shelf above my desk, a quiet trophy. Not to honor them, but to honor the girl who finally walked away. A week later, I got a letter slipped under my door. No name, no return address. Just 10 words written in careful slanted handwriting. You were never the problem, they just couldn't control you. I didn't need to know who sent it, because I already knew the truth. Family isn't blood. Family is care. Respect choice. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave. They raised me to believe that sacrifice was love. But I learned that love without respect is just manipulation. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your last name. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for stepping out of a story that only wrote you as a servant. You are not what they called you. You are what you survived. What did you think of this story if you were in Ava's shoes? Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have walked away too? Let me know in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. Because stories like this aren't rare, they're just rarely spoken aloud. Too many people are taught that silence is strength, that family comes before self. But sometimes, choosing yourself is the loudest kind of strength there is. If you've ever felt like Ava unseen, used, and quietly holding everyone together until you broke, then this story is for you. You deserve more than obligation. You deserve peace. You deserve to rebuild on your own terms. So if you support Ava's decision to take back her power, vote number 2. If you think she went too far, vote number 7. Either way, I want to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories so you never miss a powerful new drama every single day. Because here your voice matters, your scars matter, and every story has the right to be told.